I think it is quite interesting what's happening. Obviously, we very much believe in contemporary architecture, but in a very humane way. So we don't try and be in people's face and aggravate the general public. It's always good quality materials, nice schemes that people can relate to, we hope, and sort of warm, tactile materials as well, like brick and timber, etc. Things that people can feel, literally feel and touch and relate to. I think there's one interesting thing happening in London these days and in the rest of the UK as well, whereby in the past, even up until about 5 years ago, there were lots of very good buildings which were done, but they were all a bit samey. So people often did blocks of flats, contemporary, stripped back, looked good, looked nice, often in a yellow brick, but they all often look the same. And we did similar things, 5 or 10 years ago as well. There's more interest now where people are using different materials, like very interesting metalwork. Also things like, say, glazed green bricks or glazed green tiles, just mixing things up and details, using the bricks in a vertical way or in a corduroy projecting way, and incorporating lots of details, almost akin to Art Deco would have been 100 years ago. And that gives, still doing a contemporary scheme, it's still quite crisp and contemporary and stripped back, but a lot more visual interest and a lot more interesting to the public.
Okay, so what's your preferred style of architectural design now?
Yeah, I guess exactly what we've been saying, and in our schemes as well, creating more visual interest, but doing so in an objective way. So there's always a rationale for what we do. For example, it could be things, straightforward as external solar louvers to avoid excess solar gain in the summer months, while allowing lots of solar gain in the winter months when you do need it. And that, again, creates visual interest because it's on the outside of the building. It could be metal fretwork, it might be timber, it might even be terracotta, actual terracotta blades, either fixed or moving. It might be things, even a dynamic facade, where those things can slide sideways when you don't need them in the summer months. And also, I say dynamic in the sense that the louvers can move around. And louvers where they're horizontal, so people have the view straight out through all the glazing, but people maybe can't see up into people's living rooms or bedrooms, and the sun can't come down into those living rooms or bedrooms. So there's lots of tricks like that. Well, not tricks, they're just what people might call design devices. And very often the planners respect that as well. People do like visual interest. And as you know, we had a great result about 3 weeks ago at Bromley Planning Committee when our scheme there was approved. Again, that's a very simple contemporary scheme, but in very high quality materials.
Oh, yeah. On our last episode, we were talking about it, and we were
Yeah.
like, will we air it? We'll air it if it passes. It is passed.
That's right. It wasn't it that evening or something from the last podcast? Yeah, it was amazing. It's always a bit tense at these planning committees. It only got in by one vote.
So what happened?
I think it was 5-4 in the end. But some people loved it. The local people loved it. The local ward member loved it. The chair, can't say too much, but the chair was anti. But luckily, a lot of people came in behind it. So some of the planning members, which does happen to us, a few times, not often, but a few times we've had this, where the actual council members say really complimentary things about us as designers. So one of the councillor actually said, this is a great scheme by great architects. You've got to recognise the quality of this. It was as you know, it's an old folks sheltered accommodation. Not a full care home with nursing, but an old folks sheltered accommodation in the aged living sector. And one of the guys, the actual council members, the councillors, said, this is going to bring aged living accommodation in the borough into the 21st century, which is such a kind thing to say, really. They don't have to say that. And, public gallery are there listening to it and everything. And it's, live streamed on the internet. So, really nice to get that kind of positive feedback, where it's not just a case of, it's okay to approve, it's not too bad. A case of, wow, this is really exemplary. And obviously by saying that, bringing aged living into the 21st century in their borough, he sees it as a good example for us and for other architects to follow, and other developers and providers to follow going forward in their borough.
So I have a question based on where you went through that with the planning committee. It's a bit of an out there question. If I wanted, or someone wanted to build a castle, because of course now we have the castles from years ago. If we wanted to build a new castle, a modern version of a castle, is that possible? Does it have to be in a certain place, or is it just not possible nowadays?
Are you scared of going to be invaded by France again, or invaded by... There'll be an uprising. the knights are going to uprise against you, and you've got to be in your castle. It would be quite hard. I mean, there's a thing, what used to be Para, was it 79 and became Para 84, the exception houses, where you can build an exceptional house in the countryside. And that was going, way back when, almost back to, I think it was Margaret Thatcher's and John Major's time, called Gummer's Law. And that was named after an MP called John Gummer. And he almost imagined people building, not quite castles, but big Georgian country houses, big country estates in the countryside. But in the end, that's actually helped contemporary housing. So you do a one-off, really high quality, maybe sustainable contemporary house. So there's not so many people building traditional houses, should we say, or castles. I mean, there are people, I think one of was it Grand Designs recently? Somebody tried to build a castle, but that was what's called a replacement dwelling, which is obviously much, much easier than doing a new dwelling. So you buy a house, might be run down, might not even be run down, in the countryside, demolish it and replace it with another house. In planning, that is much easier than doing a brand new house.
Why?
I guess partly for sustainability reasons, because planners probably understandably hate things to be in an isolated location, what they call the pint of milk test. So, I mean, the utmost opposite of that is like being on top of a tube station, for example, So if you're not near a tube station or a railway station or a bus stop or a town centre, the pint of milk test, what do you need to do to get a pint of milk? Is it like 3 minutes walk away? Or do you have to hop in your car for 20 minutes? So it's all about minimising car use. And obviously that's a bit of a moot point these days. We get more and more electric vehicles, and the electricity of those vehicles is coming from sustainable sources, like wind turbines, etc. So that argument does fall a bit more foul on its face, if you like. It doesn't stand up as well as it would do with petrol and diesel cars. But the idea in general that planners do not like houses to be isolated. So given that there's an isolated house already, it's easier to demolish that and replace it with a bigger house.
If you could design your own perfect house, what would it look like? Would it be contemporary, ultra modern? Would it be Georgian? What would it be?
Yeah, it would definitely be contemporary. I mean, not to diss anybody's house, but my wife and I, we love watching property on television. We really do. And we often see, God, I wouldn't fancy that, I'd much rather a brand new contemporary house, even if it was smaller. So even there's such a nightmare, doing the roofs, even a nice, I guess, a well-maintained Georgian house is most people's idea of perfection, But something that's really run down, dusty, cobwebby, even things like big Victorian vicarages and things, that's not really our bag at all. Every day of the week, we'd much rather have a contemporary house. And that's why in some ways it is frustrating in England with a planning system and the NIMBYs, shall we say, that you can't, say it's harder, shall we say, to deliver contemporary houses compared to nearly everywhere else in the world, like the States, say Australia, New Zealand, even on the continent in Europe. It's much easier to build contemporary houses, but for some reason in England there's an aversion to contemporary housing, which is really weird because if you go back a few years ago, not quite airports, but they were a bit more old-fashioned, like in the 70s. Supermarkets were old-fashioned through the 80s. They looked like big sort of tile-hung barns. Got to make it look old-fashioned. And now, as you know, a lot of these supermarkets look like airports.
Yeah.
They're stunning, bright and white and tons of glass. And it's amazing how the planners and the general public's mindset are much more accepting of all those other uses being contemporary.
Yeah.
But for some reason, perhaps because Sophie's home is her castle, there seems to be a resistance to housing being contemporary. It's very, very strange. And when you do incorporate contemporary things, for example, lots of normal developers might do a house that looks more traditional at the front, but then at the back it's really contemporary. So you'll have the big sky lanterns over your island in the kitchen, loads of bifold or sliding doors at the back. So people obviously want that contemporary sort of lifestyle, but they still like the front of their house to look more old-fashioned, which is strange, really, isn't it?
Yeah. I do quite like a blend of the Georgian with contemporary.
Yeah, I think it's important to have good materials. I mean, even I don't like... I mean, we disagree because obviously Ryan, who works with us, he loves brutalist concrete architecture, I disagree a little bit. I do like more tactile materials, more warm materials, warm sort of visually and, better to the touch, shall we say, in relating to the building. Yeah, I mean, basically we want go back to what I was saying initially, really, isn't it? Contemporary architecture, but done well, with good quality materials and tactile materials and visual interest, using things which you might have to do anyway, but provides more visual interest to the building, which is good for, for the owner, good for the, passerby. Literally, you look at something and say, well, that's interesting.